drew this flipbook kind of out of order. I'm not quite sure what triggered this idea exactly, but I had this sort of image in my mind of this angular, silhouetted, Batman-like figure darting around in the shadows. Some of you may have even seen the live stream I did where I was working on the close-up of the head. This is the one part of the flipbook that ended up looking pretty much exactly how I saw it in my mind. I really liked the idea of seeing nothing but just this flat, angular, dark shape, and then these two white eyes looking around. I didn't end up doing quite what I imagined at the beginning. At first I wanted to set up this whole dark city alleyway kind of background, so I first sketched in the general shape of how I thought the buildings could be, and then I traced that onto several pages. The idea was that I was going to go through and throw in the kind of general building shapes, then draw all the animation, character animation, then I would go back at the end and fill in all the background detail after the character animation was finished. But in the end, there were a couple reasons I just got rid of the background instead. One, I liked the simpleness of the silhouetted figure against the stark white background, and two, I really just kind of ran out of time. I also wasn't totally settled on how much detail I wanted for the background, so it's possible at some point I might still go back later and add in a background, but I kind of just like it as is for now. Initially, I planned on having the figure kind of camouflaged and some shadows in the background, but then decided to have him drop in from above and do that kind of classic superhero three-point landing. So I messed around with what his shape would look like dropping in. At first I had the cape wide, almost like he was using it as a glider to slow his fall, but then I decided to go with more speed for that harder landing, and so then I just had his cape trailing straight behind him. So for the landing, I pulled up some images for reference on this pose, and there are lots out there. This is like the cool superhero landing. I imagine if there were, a school for superheroes, there would probably be a whole semester class on doing this landing. It might even be like a qualifying class for getting into the superhero program. If you can't do this pose, sorry, but you can't be a superhero. Now, if I were being overly critical, this part didn't end up fitting exactly with the super angular style that I saw in my head. It ended up a little more realistic looking than I had wanted, but I still think it looks good, and then he stands up right away into this straight-edged silhouette, so I think it still works all right. And that kind of got me thinking a little bit about how things don't often end up landing exactly how you imagine sometimes. Sometimes that can be disappointing, but it could also be part of the fun because it can surprise you and you don't know for sure how something artistic will end up. Sometimes it's even better than you imagined. And I kind of think that's true for almost any creative or artistic endeavor. I've made quite a few live action short films, and that's almost always the case. To start with, I'll just have a vague idea in my mind, or sometimes I'll even have a very, very specific idea, but in the end, when it comes to the editing, it always ends up somewhat different than how you originally imagined, and it almost always ended up, surprising me, or turns out better in some way than I imagined initially. And I guess on that note, I do have a few of my old live action short films on this channel. I'll put links to a couple of them in the video description below if you'd like to check those out. When he dashes out of frame, I wanted it to still feel angular and stylized and not too curvy. So what I did is, even though his cape is curving as he moves, I kept all those lines angular so that those are straight edges and corners. I briefly sketched in some legs here, but I decided I liked it better feeling more just like a shadow shape darting around, so then I got rid of the legs. For this part, when he pops up into view, because it happens so quickly, I had tried faking some motion blur on his eyes for just one frame. In stop motion, that's a trick we often use. Since there is generally no motion blur in stop motion, we'll sometimes put in doubles of an object in place of having a blur. So I tried that here with his eyes, but in the end, it just kind of felt more distracting than helpful, so I went back, filled in the double eyes with black, and just got rid of it. And I think it works better this way, and it's not distracting. After I had penciled everything in, I went back and I inked it. For the super tiny details, like the eyes here, they were so tiny. So I used a Copic .03 pen. It's probably the smallest pen tip I have ever seen, and it did really well for his tiny eyes. I actually used it on the entire outline here, and then after that I went back and started filling in with a normal thicker pen, and then I filled in the larger areas with a black Copic sketch marker. So in the end, I like how clean and simple and stark it looked on an all-white background, so I decided to leave it. Again, maybe I'll go back later at some point and add in a background, but for now I kind of prefer it like this. Maybe later, if I decided to print a run of this one, I would go back and add in some sort of background, but for now I'm happy with it. And I think that's it for this video. So thanks for watching, keep creating, and I will see you in the next video.